Kentucky basketball can improve to 5-0 for the first time since the 2015-16 season tonight, and it looks like they're going to be able to get the job done pretty easily.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with Jackson State happening later tonight. Going to break down what we know about the Tigers, what they do well, what they've struggled with. It's a team that is struggling right now. The numbers don't spell positive things for the Tigers, but I think that the Wildcats of Kentucky need to play their best game, play an A game tonight against Jackson State for a multitude of reasons that we'll get into. And then to wrap up the show, we got a new segment for you guys. We're going to be doing Fridays and Mondays called Mark It Down. Super fun. Going to get into it later on in the show. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed there. And if you're listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if they win their first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So normally on these previews, we kind of dive into what the team is overall, kind of what they do well, and then what they struggle with. I'm going to kind of flip the script a little bit here, and I think that it'll make sense why pretty quickly. We'll dive into what we know about Jackson State, but I want to kind of start with why they've struggled so far this season and kind of what they've struggled with. So Jackson State, in case you don't know, a part of the SWAC conference. This is a part of the BBN Invitational. Jackson State has already played Western Kentucky. They will play Lipscomb here in just a few days after playing the Wildcats, but they're playing Kentucky tonight. Jackson State so far 0-5 and number 320 in KenPom. And I think that is enough to explain to you kind of why we're starting with the negatives here, because the numbers, at least the ones on KenPom and then the eye test, I went and watched a couple of different games, at least the footage that I could get of Jackson State so far this season. They don't spell particularly positive things. If you want to go and look at their game against Xavier, you can find the entire game on YouTube. It was a nightmare for them defensively. If you want to go watch the highlights that Vanderbilt posted in their 94-81 win over Jackson State just a few days ago, they absolutely crushed the Tigers. Vanderbilt did in transition. We'll talk about that later on. But numbers, eye test, this is a team that is struggling right now against some better competition. And I do want to give them some credit here. They have played very well in SWAC play over the last couple of seasons with head coach Mo Williams. And yes, that is Mo Williams, former NBA player, here coaching the Tigers. But against these non-conference opponents, these really solid non-conference teams, they have struggled and they have lost and they have typically gotten blown out. All 5 of their opponents rank 129th or higher on KenPom. Again, have played some pretty solid competition to boot so far. Their strength of schedule is like top 15 on KenPom right now, which is really funny. And their average margin of defeat against teams ranked 100th or higher, and they've played 3 of them already, is 35.7 points. They lost by 47 to open the season against number 3 Houston. They lost 94-57 against Xavier, and then they lost 94-81 against Vanderbilt. This is a team right now that has played some much better competition and has just simply not been able to keep up. And a lot of it starts with what's going on the defensive end. Defensively, they have the 3rd worst effective field goal percentage in the country. As of right now, the effective field goal percentage on defense is 63.6%. That's what they're giving up to opponents. That is horrendous. They have the 2nd worst three-point defense in the nation, giving up 47.2% from behind the arc. You're starting to see here how Kentucky could take advantage of this team tonight. Teams so far this season have scored incredibly quickly, essentially at will. Their defense is 8th nationally in average possession length, just 14.8 seconds. They're starting to see how Kentucky could take advantage of this here. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you have to break down, and it's all due respect to Jackson State. Again, Mo Williams has done a very good job in conference play, and they're projected to be 10-8 in conference play this season. It's just whenever they get matched up against these bigger teams, these faster teams, they have just simply not been able to keep up. Again, Vanderbilt violated them in transition, and I think that's kind of where this conversation starts and ends. If Kentucky wants to get out in transition like they've said they've wanted to all season, and they have been able to, if they want to do that in this game, they're going to have the opportunity to do it, and they're going to have the ability to score in bunches. Now, I'm curious, and I'll say this again later on whenever I'm giving my predictions, I'm curious how Kentucky will balance 3-pointers and 2-pointers in this game, because Vanderbilt, for all intents and purposes, like, yes, they shot very well from 3 against Jackson State, and Vandy was their most recent opponent, and I'm talking about them a lot because they're an SEC team, so it's something that you can compare here. Vandy shot 42% from beyond the arc against the Tigers, but they were 17 of 25 inside the arc. They were 68% from 2. So Kentucky, notoriously efficient underneath Mark Pope inside the arc, or at least teams have been notoriously efficient. If you go back and look at some of those BYU squads, will they lean in to the paint a little bit more? Will they go and be aggressive and just start chucking up threes and just expect that they go in against this team? I'm curious to see what Kentucky does. Offensively, if you want to start to talk about some of the positives, they did score 81 against Vanderbilt, and there are a couple of different bright spots that I do want to get to, because it's not just all gloom and doom. Again, this team has the ability to perform very well in conference play, and we'll dive into it in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less and at least 2 players for a shot to win up to $100 or 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Again, you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive, which is really, really sweet. You can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. It is the place to go if you want daily fantasy sports. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Thank you guys so much to everyone that's been listening as of late. Been gaining a lot of new guys, not a lot of new guys and gals that have been watching the show, listening to the show. We just hit 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. Absolutely insane. It's difficult for me to kind of fathom sometimes the amount of people that have just decided to come and watch this show, come and comment and talk about Kentucky basketball. I absolutely love it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And the people as well on Twitter at Locked On UK that are supporting me there as well. It's been super, super awesome. And I love getting to do stuff like this, getting to break down Kentucky basketball games. Kentucky versus Jacksonville State. Going to continue along here. Like I mentioned, there are some positives for the Jackson State Tigers on offense. They did score 81 points against Vanderbilt, and that is something that I really wanted to focus on. They have the ability to get to the foul line at a pretty decent rate. And that is something that I think we should be paying attention to heading into this game, because it's kind of how they've gotten their points, period, this year. Against Vanderbilt, they were 24 of 30 from the charity stripe. They got 30 shots from the foul line. That's 11 more than they got from three. And they were able to fill it up there and get a majority of their points elsewhere as well against other opponents. If you go and look at point distribution so far this season on KenPom, it's just percentage of your total points. Jackson State's getting 23.8% of their points from the charity stripe. That is 57th nationally. That is easily the most that Kentucky has seen this season. So they draw fouls, they hit their free throws, and that's kind of where it starts and ends in terms of offensive abilities as a team. Individually, there is one player for the Tigers that I'm going to pull up here that I do want to keep an eye on. It's their leading scorer, Jamie Mitchell Jr., averaging 13.8 points, 4.4 rebounds, and a steal per contest. He's shooting 38.7% from three, just 40.7% from the floor, but the kid can get buckets, and he's kind of been the one that's been the bright spot for them throughout the course of this very young season. Again, not the most efficient player, but he can score at different points, and I like his game. He is somebody that Kentucky's going to have to match up with on the wing. Curious to see how Kobe Brea or Otega Oweh handle him. He, alongside their charity stripe abilities, that's the only two things that are major concerns to me in this game. Kentucky is 8-0 all-time against SWAC opponents. Their last matchup actually was against Florida A&M in 2022. They won 88-68. Cason Wallace scored 27 and 9 assists there. And this is kind of where it all culminates for me, if we're giving our prediction. Unless they're just simply not hitting their shots, Kentucky should dominate in transition. They should go out there and run and hit threes and hit layups and hit dunks. This should be a blowout. On paper, this is projected to be a blowout. I think Kentucky, last time I checked, was favored by 34.5 points. Kentucky should win this game by a large margin, and I don't like to talk about games like this a ton because it feels like I'm trashing the opponent, but the reality of the situation is Kentucky is more athletic. They are more talented. I think they're probably better coached in this game. All respect to Mo Williams, just because of what Mark Pope's able to do offensively. A lot of teams have already given respect and their credence to Mark Pope. Teams that Kentucky has played already, just stunned at how efficient and how good they are. I think that Jackson State, while they do have the ability to play well against teams in their conference, I don't know if they're going to be able to stick around here. Upsets can happen. They absolutely can. I don't necessarily know if they're going to happen today. I do think it's worth pointing out that Jackson State, and I'm going to correct myself if I'm wrong, in 2022? No, it might have been last season, actually. Yes, it was last season. Last season, they did beat Missouri on the road, 73-72. Of course, Missouri was ranked 145th on KenPom. This Kentucky team a little bit better than that. Actually, real quick, just want to point this out here. Kentucky was ranked 19th last time you and I talked on KenPom. They jumped 4 spots after doing nothing to 15th. So Kentucky now top 15 on KenPom with the number 12 offense and number 32 defense. Hold that thought on the defense. We're going to talk about it here in just a minute. Again, as far as how Kentucky approaches this, I'm curious to see how much they focus on threes, considering, again, Vanderbilt absolutely crushed them in the paint. I think Kentucky can do a lot of different things in this game. I think they can play a lot of different kids and get some more experience for some of their younger guys, possibly. It should be a blowout. Kentucky is projected to win this game, I believe, 92-62. 30-point win. I think Kentucky wins by more than that. Now, do they score over 100? We'll just have to wait and see. Does Jackson State get over 65? Again, it'll just be determined by how Kentucky plays for that final few minutes. So I think Kentucky wins by more than 30. That is my prediction. I don't have a specific score, but I want to ask you guys, for those of you watching before this tips off, what do you think about the game tonight? What's your final score prediction? All right, new segment for you guys here. Breaking down a new segment called Mark It down. Got some bold takes for you guys here in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcoholic probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. And pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. You can go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order. So when you use Locked On College at checkout, Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason at all, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL. It's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. Again, appreciate it if you guys would subscribe wherever you are tuned in. We've got a new segment for you guys here called Mark It Down. I'm going to give you guys a take on the next couple of Kentucky basketball games. We will revisit it. We will assess how I did with my projections, and then we will go at it and we'll mark it down again in the future. Get it? Mark Pope, mark it down. Write this down on your little pad, as my dad likes to say. Anyway, mark it down. We got a little animation here on YouTube for those watching. Mark it down. Kentucky will be inside the top 30 in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom after their next two games. Top 30. As of right now, Kentucky is currently ranked 32nd, and you may say, Lance, Kentucky could play some very solid games against Jackson State and Western Kentucky, and they could hold there, or they could possibly fall, and that's very much so a possibility, but I believe Kentucky will sneak their way inside the top 30 for a couple of reasons, and they have to do with Jackson State and Western Kentucky's offenses. Jackson State right now, 316th nationally in adjusted efficiency on offense. Western Kentucky, number 226. Neither of these teams are playing very well on the offensive end of the floor right now. So I think Kentucky's currently underrated defense, paired alongside these incredibly lacking offenses with Kentucky at home against the Tigers and the Hilltoppers, I think Kentucky's going to be able to put on some really solid performances, and they will be able to make their way inside the top 30 because of that. As my friend Ken says, 30 is better than anything underneath it, as we all know. It's just math. He also believes that 3 is better than 2, but it's a conversation for another day. I agree, but it's just not really what we're doing here. Anyway, Jackson State and Western Kentucky both struggled to score. I think Kentucky will take advantage of that. They're going to be able to go out there, manhandle, I think, both of these teams in the paint. If I'm not mistaken, Western Kentucky actually relies on three-point shooting a pretty decent clip. Yeah, they do. So, and they're not shooting very well overall, including from three. So I think Kentucky's going to have an opportunity to get some gimmies here over these next couple of games. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, we don't see any UNC Wilmington stuff now that I've said that. But currently, again, ranked number 32. I think they'll be inside the top 30, 29th or higher against these two opponents. So mark it down, as you can see here on YouTube. All right, you get to see my wonderful editing skills in Canva and Adobe. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. You can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with my hot takes here on Mark It Down? Do you disagree? You can hit me in the comments below. I will see you all tomorrow for for another episode of, wrong hotkey. I'll see you all tomorrow for another, I hit it again. Wow, I am just crushing it. See you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky, recapping Kentucky against Jacksonville State. See you all then. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and God bless.